Welcome everyone. Thank you for coming to the Toronto launch event for We're Coming for You and Your Rotten System, How Socialists Beat Amazon and Upended Big City Politics. We're very honored to be hosting the author Jonathan Rosenblum to speak about the book and for a discussion of some of the lessons from the movement around Kshama Sawant in Seattle. Before jumping into things, we'd like to acknowledge that this event is taking place on the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, Chippewa, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. While we do more than just acknowledge, we're grateful to have the chance to gather and learn from one another in this place, and we furthermore acknowledge the right of First Nations and Indigenous peoples to true national self-determination. We also believe it's important to recognize the common struggles experienced by Indigenous and non-Indigenous working people and the ways in which capitalism relies on prejudice, exploitation, and oppression to keep us divided. We also want to acknowledge the ongoing genocide in Palestine by the Israeli state, which is ongoing despite an apparent ceasefire, and still to this day supported by the Canadian government. We join calls for a two-way arms embargo to end the genocide, free Palestine from the river to the sea, and encourage everyone in attendance to heed calls for action from Palestinian trade movements and civil society groups. So my name is Graeme. I'm a member of the Socialist Project and a volunteer with the Leopold School for Socialist Education, which was founded in 2023 by members of the Socialist Project. The school emerged at a moment where popular frustrations abound over inequality, the narrowing of democracy, squandering of human potential, and the ever-clearer reality of impending environmental catastrophe. We strive to provide radical, accessible, and practical educational programming for those seeking to better understand and address the crises of our current times. Tonight we'll be hearing from Jonathan about some of the topics of this book, his experiences as an organizer with Kshama Sawant's campaign, and hopefully pose some of the challenges for those of us who are invested in fighting for a better world. We hope that you'll stick around afterwards to continue the discussion. But to introduce Jonathan, Jonathan Rosenblum has caused trouble for the rich and powerful for over 40 years. He's helped workers throughout North America organize, bargain, and strike in a range of industries. As a member of the National Writers Union and a veteran newspaper reporter, he's published dozens of articles about organizing and is the author of Beyond 15, Immigrant Workers, Faith Activists, and the Revival of the Labor Movement. During Kshama Sawant's decade on the Seattle City Council, Jonathan worked on her council staff and as an election campaigner. He's also a logistics worker and active in efforts to organize Amazon in Seattle and across North America. A lot of people are looking at New York City. We should maybe also be looking at Seattle. So with that, I will shut up and invite Jonathan to come up and take the mic.
Thank you, Graeme. Really appreciate the introduction. Thank you to the Leopold School for Socialist Education, to this Quaker Meeting House, to Herman Rosenfeld for putting me up this weekend and serving excellent breakfast. It really is good to be here tonight as an American, and in these times when we say that, it really means something. It's good to be in Canada. So really, congratulations to all of you. You say we should look toward New York or Seattle or elsewhere, but you know, we're dealing with some tremendous struggles of our own, which I'll talk about, but you're also doing important work in the fight for housing affordability, organizing workers at Amazon, helping out strikes of flight attendants, postal workers, and so on. And everything that you do, no matter how small or insignificant it may seem, is vital resistance to the billionaire class and their political representatives who want to change the world globally. They are not stopping at national borders. You're giving hope to working people who are today desperately in need of leadership and direction for how to fight back. So really, congratulations to you as well. Now, anyone with a shred of humanity in our countries is wondering today, what's the way forward? How do we fight in this political moment that we're in? And lots of folks have responses. The answers vary a lot because they stem from different understandings, not just of where we're at today, but how we got here. And I count three distinct answers. Let's work within the political establishment. Let's try to co-opt the political establishment. And then third, revolutionary politics. Now, my book is about this last one, But before we go there, I want to spend some time addressing why the first two are dead ends for our working class and for social movements, because those two answers are more prevalent, they are more attractive to people, and they usually are posed to us as the only choices available. But they are not our only choices, and our first responsibility as socialists is to win people over to recognize that we have more choices than the political establishment offers us. The examples I'm going to give are largely outside of Canada, but I think they relate to your situation as well, since we all exist within the neoliberal capitalist system. The first response, let's work with the political establishment. The October 18th No Kings rallies were truly impressive in scale. 2,700 protests around the country, nearly 7 million people involved. And it really showed the breadth of popular opposition to the ICE kidnappings, the billionaires' takeover of government, and the growing fascist threat in the US. Let's give credit to everyone who turned out. It was truly exciting to be there in the crowd. Thousands of protesters, probably 90,000 in Seattle alone. But the main protest leaders, the groups like Indivisible and 50501, were all about pointing people back toward the Democratic Party, a focus on anti-Trump slogans, no crowns, no kings, not what we need to be fighting for materially. They did not want to talk about material demands. And by the way, they also isolated Palestinian speakers in several cities as well. Democratic politicians got in front of No King's Day microphones to tell people that to stop Trump, we must vote for Democrats, the exact same strategy that steered us into today's mess. And it's the same even with people like Bernie Sanders and his Fight Oligarchy tour, drawing tens of thousands of people with stirring denunciations of Elon Musk and the billionaires. But where does he take his class war analysis? Back to voting blue. This sort of strategy is not just doubling down on past failure, it's steering the anti-Trump movement into the blind alley of establishment politics, threatening to squander this budding grassroots energy. If you think that telling people to vote Democratic will still work after two epic failures, then you really are not thinking straight. Many of these Democrats point the finger at Trump voters and call them idiotic or crazy. Rather than look, by the way, many of the people I work with at Amazon, right? Trump voters. Rather than look inward at the party's failure, they point fingers outward. Make no mistake, this is fundamentally an anti-working class argument by the political elites. It's not only shameful, it's intellectually lazy. It's a failure to recognize that Trump rode to power last year atop the deep alienation of millions of ordinary Americans, tens of millions, who were drowning in a half-century of neoliberalism, the destruction of social supports, the privatization of public spaces, the exaltation of corporate profits over the planet, the abandonment and aggressive policing of working class communities, the violent repression of social movements, the support of genocide abroad. Workers know that neoliberalism has been a bipartisan project. Our lived experiences have hammered into our bones that the political duopoly, with Democrats and Republicans each playing distinct but mutually reinforcing roles, will never meet our needs. Polls in the United States show that nearly 6 out of every 10 adults believes that neither the Democrats nor the Republicans represent them and that a new political party is needed. Nearly 6 out of 10. This is not a new phenomenon. Support for a new party has been at this level for most of the last 17 years. There were Democratic Party signs at the No Kings rally I saw that read, "If Kamala Harris was president, we'd all be having brunch." Did you see any of those on the social media? Yeah. Well, okay, so maybe you would, and how nice for you. It's also true that your brunch server, your cook, your dishwasher would still be subject to the paltry federal minimum wage of $7.25 an hour, same as it's been for the last 16 years, including time when the Democrats held all the levers of power to change the minimum wage. Your tax dollars would still be funding an Israeli genocide in Palestine. and the repression of protest at home, and the climate crisis would still be hurtling forward. It is pure imaginary thinking to believe that the party that failed us for decades is somehow now going to save the working class and democracy in America. And I think increasingly people coming out for these protests, especially those fighting ICE in Chicago and LA and elsewhere, are losing patience with Democrats trying to lead them in no king's chance. Now, a second answer to this question, what's the way forward from here, comes from political activists, progressives, and even some self-described socialists who reproach the Democratic Party but are convinced that they can change the party from the inside. Many of them, in fact, have been successful at winning political office, and indeed, we're likely to see progressive Democrats, even democratic socialists, get elected in municipal races in New York, Seattle, and elsewhere this November. But winning political office is not the same thing as winning political power. Political power is the ability to make and enforce decisions that materially change the lives of our community members. Rent freeze or rent increase, social housing or millionaire condos, living wages or corporate profits, Green New Deal or Wall Street, indigenous communities or tar sands. The political arena is not some sort of freewheeling debate salon, may the best idea win out. In capitalist society, the political arena and the rules for operating within it are constructed intentionally to preserve and reinforce the capitalist status quo. Think for a moment about the flight attendant strike at Air Canada, which was very inspiring to many of you, and I know many of us south of the border. A powerful strike by airline workers, too powerful for big business, right? So the government outlawed strike action. Ottawa is not some sort of neutral arbiter for dispensing blind justice. It's federal government working hand in glove with big business to outlaw workers' most powerful weapon and force the flight attendants back to work on terms more favorable to the billionaire class. So we have to do basic power analysis anytime we enter one of these fights. Now I want to turn to New York, and I would agree with many people that it is exciting to see Zoran Mamdani's mayoral campaign. If and when Mamdani, a member of Democratic Socialists of America, wins, what will happen? Let's do some power analysis. New York City is the finance capital of the world. The billionaires who hold real power in New York, BlackRock, Vanguard, KKR, JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, and others, they're not all of a sudden going to say, okay, socialists, you won the election, we give up, here are the keys to the city, are they? And it's not just them. The full apparatus of state power, the executive and legislative branches of government, the bureaucracy, the court system, the police, along with adjacent institutions like the political establishment parties and the media, they're not all of a sudden going to pivot to support Mamdani's demands for a rent freeze, taxing the rich, free transit, free daycare, publicly owned groceries, and so on. No, they have an interest in preserving the status quo, and they are going to fight with everything they have against his platform. So if you run for office under capitalism and you want to represent our working class, thinking you can get inside the palace and tame the system, that defies basic common sense, power analysis, and history. Instead, you have to see yourself as an insurgent inside the enemy's camp, an unwanted intrusion. Our opponents certainly see us that way. You are not politicians like them. You are not there to become a skilled legislator, to manage the levers of power, to make backroom deals, to get comfortable with the sinecures of political office. You are a shop steward for the working class, accountable to people in the streets, not the suites. Your office is a strategic position from which to build outside movements, disruptive movements strong enough to force concessions. You are there to build working class power. Now, progressive activists who aspire to reform the Democratic Party gloss over this sort of class analysis. They place faith in personal relationships and press release statements. They talk about recruiting the right candidates and not enough about the right demands. They run as outside political organizers, but then shed organizing for legislating and backdoor negotiations. This is a recipe for failure, and we see this already with Mamdani. Let's be honest, right? Who electrified working class people with his bold demands. Now he is huddling privately with Democratic Party politicians and business executives, hedging on his tax-the-rich demands, saying he'd openly welcome Zionists in the top echelons of his administration, and apologizing to the cops for calling them racist. Now, I certainly want to see Mamdani prevail over Cuomo next month, but let's be clear that these are all serious missteps. Every time a progressive or reform socialist starts making concessions to our political enemies, it doesn't mute their opposition, it doesn't neutralize them. It only whets their appetite for yet more compromise. Our political enemies have a playbook, and if you've ever organized at work, you'll understand that it's not much different from what bosses and union busters do. Co-opt and contain, distract and marginalize, threaten and lie, and when the movement has been sufficiently weakened, kill it off completely. I do hope that post-election, the street movement will stay true to its insurgent origins in New York and fight unreservedly for its bold demands. That is what it's going to take to win, not making concessions to the political establishment, because it is class struggle, not class snuggle, that gets the goods. The forces behind Mamdani, and indeed all of us on the left, need to recognize that Democrats and Republicans fight over policy within narrow confines. In this political pas de deux, the two parties play different but complementary roles. And you have similar situation here in Canada too, right? Republicans represent the unvarnished greed of the billionaire class. Democrats claim to play a moderating role, seeking to smooth out the rough edges of neoliberal capitalism. They try to deceive us into thinking that they represent a true alternative and that they represent our interests, when in fact their role is just to reinforce the system. This sort of disingenuousness makes the Democrats in some ways more insidious than their Republican dance partners, because their role is to work relentlessly to co-opt and steer social movements into political dead ends, and when necessary to water down any progressive legislation so as to relieve political pressure while avoiding alienating their political patrons. We see that continually with the Democrats in the US, and yes, you do have it here in Canada as well. Most notably in British Columbia, where the NDP is in government and has provoked a strike of tens of thousands of public sector workers, which I believe is still going on after a couple of months. In the US, that's why the federal minimum wage hasn't budged in 16 years. Even when Democrats controlled Congress and the White House, it's why Democrats failed to enshrine women's health care rights when they held Congress, why military budgets go up no matter who is in power, why corporate profits rise no matter who is in power. Both parties are funded by and serve the interests of big business. Both are committed in their symbiotic relationship of contesting yet colluding to uphold the capitalist system. For those who hope to win over the Democratic Party to meaningful reform, I would say simply this: look objectively at the last 50 years. It is pure fantasy to think that you can build an anti-capitalist movement within a capitalist institution. So then what is the way forward? We'll turn to the third answer, revolutionary politics, and I'll talk about the book in a moment. But I want to say, first of all, one of the most hopeful political developments of our time comes out of Britain, where members of the Labour Party, disillusioned with the party's rightward swing, have left en masse. They've had it with a party that claims to represent the working class but imposes austerity, xenophobia, and transphobia at home, and genocide and wars abroad. So they're forming a new, explicitly socialist political party with a founding convention next month. For now, they're calling it Your Party, as I think most of you probably have heard, and 800,000 people in just a few weeks expressed interest in joining. This is no let's work within the system movement, at least for many within your party, and I recognize there will be contest within the organization about how explicitly socialist it is and whether it does adopt a revolutionary attitude. But just listen for a moment to Zara Sultana, a member of parliament and one of the leaders of this breakaway movement. She told a rally earlier this month in Liverpool that your party is not aiming for incremental change. Quote, "We need democratic control of the economy, by workers, because capitalism isn't just a few bad bosses or greedy companies. It's a system geared and built for private profit, not social need. And as long as this system remains, it will continue to reproduce inequality and exploitation. It is only socialism that can lay the foundation for general equality, solidarity, and freedom. That's her quote. This new party, she declared, will fight for housing, food, and education for all, for civil rights, for migrant rights, and for a free Palestine. And now compare this for a moment to the watered-down rhetoric of reform socialists in my country and also in yours. It is utterly different, and it is refreshing. It's different from reform efforts because it stems from a different analysis of the system that we confront. As Sultana said, it's a system geared and built for private profit, not social need. So that's speaking prospectively, but you might ask, how would this look in actual life? How would revolutionary socialists wage political struggle? And particularly, since political struggle has to begin at the grassroots, how does this look at the local municipal level? And answering these questions is precisely why I wrote the book. It chronicles how over the course of a full decade, on the strength of a single socialist seat in a 9-seat city council in Seattle, Washington, we won transformative victories. A first ever tax on Amazon to build social housing. The first big city to win a $15 minimum wage, which today has increased to nearly $21 an hour. Breakthrough renters' rights, abortion and mental health funding, a ban on caste discrimination, funding for LGBTQ youth services, and much more. We did not win in Seattle by trying to change mainstream political parties from within or by playing by the establishment's rules. We built our own independent political movements guided by a revolutionary approach to political struggle. And by that I mean building working class power outside of the establishment parties, outside of City Hall, and in direct opposition to the political establishment. Many of you know our movement was led by Kshama Sawant, a Marxist and a member of the political organization she belonged to at the time, Socialist Alternative. Kshama was elected to the 9-member city council in 2013, beating a 4-term incumbent with a call for a $15 minimum wage at a time when the minimum wage was below $10. We organized and fought, and we waged legislative battles over the course of a decade. We won 3 re-election campaigns against the combined forces of the political establishment, Amazon, Starbucks, Microsoft, Boeing, and the other major corporations that call Seattle home. We approach things with what I describe in the book as the 3 pillars of Marxist insurgent struggle. And I want to describe each of them to you because I think it provides an important template for how we think about struggle, especially at the municipal level. First, we recognize that political struggle is class struggle and that our main responsibility, therefore, was to use the city council office to build mass street movements, to press demands, and to force political concessions. We knew that the Democrats on city council, nominally progressive, were our primary obstacle, working assiduously to co-opt social movements. What we won and where we fell short would be entirely determined by the balance of power between our movements and our opponents, not by the ability on the dais to enlighten or persuade other city council members. So that's the first one, class struggle. Our second principle of Marxist insurgent politics was advancing bold material demands that are explicitly connected to the call for broader societal change. We know that working people alienated by mainstream politics will get engaged when they see a movement that speaks to their material needs, that explains the underlying problem, and that provides a course of action. Bold demands also are important because we need to educate and engage our neighbors and coworkers about capitalism's inability to meet our basic needs, and therefore why we must build systems for systemic change, build for a socialist future. Too many progressives, certainly in my country and I think probably in yours, move from one campaign to another, taking aim at the maladies of capitalism without parsing why these problems persist. But you can't properly treat cancer without first having a correct diagnosis. The obscene wealth of the billionaires and the human suffering on the streets today are not operational errors in capitalism. They are the system working exactly as it intended. So that's the second. The third principle of Marxist political insurgency that we practiced was popular movement democracy. The ongoing engagement of community members in setting demands and in deciding strategies for how to wage the struggle. Our popular movement democracy, with a particular focus on involving people from marginalized communities, is much broader than the customary definition of democracy in capitalist society. Kshama and Socialist Alternative invited community members into forums where they would discuss and decide what demands to place before the city council and how to wage those fights. The $15 minimum wage strategy was developed through neighborhood and citywide meetings. The decision to push for a ballot initiative as a backstop to legislative fight, a tactic that proved decisive, was debated and approved at a mass meeting of hundreds of workers. We organized battles for tenants' rights, housing, LGBTQ rights, and a ceasefire in Gaza through popular assemblies, sometimes taking over city council meetings with hundreds of people. So those three pillars, a fighting class struggle approach, bold demands, and movement democracy. Our socialist decade in Seattle has important lessons for activists everywhere, including here in Canada. It shows that we can take on big business and win. That class struggle is what gets the goods. It stands apart from virtually every other political movement in the US and Canada today, and it points the way forward for how we take on Trump, the billionaires, and the fascists. Now, Seattle was a big project, and taking on Trump is a bigger project by many orders of magnitude, and winning socialism yet even more orders of magnitude in difficulty. So we do have to ask ourselves, what should we do today, tomorrow, next week? We can't just gaze up at that brilliant socialist North Star and debate issues, right? We have to have our feet solidly on the ground, figuring out what our next steps are. Whether marching alongside folks who have illusions about the political establishment, or with those who want to believe that we can reform the Democrats, the NDP, Labor, etc., or organizing with comrades who are hungry for a revolutionary approach but don't really know what that means, we need to raise four basic questions. 1, what are our material demands? 2, why does the conflict exist in the first place? 3, who is on our side and who is against us? And 4, what do we need to do to prevail? These practical questions, raised genuinely and in a comradely spirit, build political understanding and consciousness. They underscore the central role of power and class. They help us figure out our next steps. More than a century ago, during World War I, Rosa Luxemburg wrote that, quote, bourgeois society stands at the crossroads, either transition to socialism or regression into barbarism. How painfully true this remains, even today. But we are not helpless observers in this drama, staring at the turbulent world from behind some museum glass. We are direct actors. Which path we take at the crossroads is up to us. We have ideas and energy. We have each other. We understand power and class. And we have the knowledge and experience born out of places like Seattle, but not just Seattle, that we can take on and beat the most powerful adversaries, and that a better world, a socialist world, can be won. So thank you all for inviting me in solidarity.
Maybe we'll ask people if we can take like 2 questions at a time, and we'll see how that goes. So if you have a question you'd like to ask Jonathan, raise your hand.
You know, in my summation chapter, I write about how, you know, this is, I write about a story when Kshama and I were meeting with a community member, and he said, we need 1,000 Kshamas. And both of us sort of grimaced a little bit about that, because it's this idea that we just need to enter people into politics. It's if the social movements are not robust and strong enough and ideologically oriented in the right direction, it doesn't matter how good you put somebody into office. And Mamdani is a classic example. How good will he be? It depends on the strength of the movement, right? There's some warning signs since the primary, but we'll see what the movement does post-election. And that we'll have 1,000 Kshamas when we have the social movements that are strong enough to support that sort of entry into the political arena. And we're not even close to that in the US or Canada, I would say. But we have to look at this not just as how do we get people elected, but how do we build the sort of working class power that will do a number of things. One is win on the shop floor, win in the community, and yes, put our shop stewards into government, right? But they're shop stewards, they're not politicians. There's a quote in this chapter also from Sam, who appropriately points out that the starting point for a lot of this work has to be in unions, because almost everybody works, right? Or they engage in work in some way or another, and that people come together and work. They don't sort of choose to be together politically. They choose to be together because everyone needs to make a wage, and that really and the workplace and the contradictions that arise between people's needs and the business's interests create the arena where you can have these discussions about what's going on and begin to politicize them. And I gave you 4 questions. There may be more, but it's sort of like the Passover thing. There's only 4 questions, right? We can begin to engage people about what are you demanding? Why does this problem exist, right? And many union leaders can do the first 2 questions, but then they don't do the class analysis, who's on our side and who's not, right? And it's our job, I think, when we are in the workplace to raise that question. And then, okay, so given all that, what do we need to do? In the afterwards of the book, I also talk about how I spent time in the run-up to the election in Kentucky working with Amazon workers who are organizing at the major air cargo hub, and I spent a weekend with one worker going around doing house visits, and we get a chance to talk politics. We count how many signs for Trump, how many signs for Harris in different neighborhoods, and he voted for Trump, right? Because he said in the 4 years that Biden's been in office, my rent went up, COVID protections went away, student debt relief did not happen, all these other, food prices went up. His material conditions had worsened in the last 4 years. And I don't see that assessment as a bad thing. I see that as a starting point for really engaging him and many other workers around this stuff. To say, as the political establishment in the Democratic Party says, well, the Trumpies are deplorables, they're crazy, they're this, they're that. It really is an anti-working class attitude, because it says we're not going to talk about this, right? And we have to as workers. I can tell you, when I drive part-time for Amazon right now out of Seattle, and the people I drive with, I'm sure quite a few of them were Trump voters. I'm sure quite a few of them were. And that doesn't make them bad people. That means they're just people who have not had the sort of political leadership to say there's a different way to fight this battle. When the Amazon tax that we won was first proposed, the Democrats actually hijacked our legislation and then drove down the price of the bill down to $47 million a year. This is in 2018. And they voted for it. And we obviously supported it because it was a big step in the right direction to at least get the tax on the books. And immediately there was a huge corporate backlash, and there was a capital strike by Amazon. Amazon announced very quickly there are 2 buildings they were going to occupy downtown. Now they occupy about 25% of the downtown real estate as it is, and they're huge, tens of thousands of workers in the Seattle area. They said, these 2 buildings under construction, we're going to stop construction on them, and we're not going to lease them. And this was designed intentionally to elicit a counter-reaction from the building trades workers especially, and they were very successful. in doing it. The iron workers came to a press conference we had and completely sabotaged it, right? And press was awash with, this Amazon tax is killing jobs. Look, it's already killing these 300 building trades jobs, right? And so it was very effective in doing that. And so I think it would be wrong for us as a movement to sort of pass it off as insignificant and to tell people, oh, they'll never do that. The truth is, they will actually do stuff like that, and we have to take on that fight. Now, the second time we came back and won the Amazon tax, there was none of that because we built the movement, not the Democrats, and we built it in a way that really just overpowered them with the Black Lives Matter movement at the time. It was the summer of 2020, and the political momentum had changed. It hadn't changed just because it somehow changed. It changed because we changed it through grassroots organizing, and that insulated the movement and it insulated the legislation, certainly, from the sort of capital strikes that we saw before. I think in New York, the answer would be the same. You have to build social movements that are strong enough to fight back and to say that's wrong, right? And to go after those companies that threaten to go on strike as well. So instead of trying to compromise or play down the impact of this sort of stuff, capital flight is not a new tactic, right? We see it in many, many different battlegrounds. I'm not a member of CSA. So, and I've not been to, I've been to some meetings, but I can't say that I'm close enough to know how to navigate that internally. I know there's debates ongoing within DSA around whether to break from the Democrats or not. And I think the work that I do, is to write the book and to talk about the struggles and experiences and to use that as an example. And there are some people in DSA who will agree with that and some people who won't. And I'm going to New York after this weekend here, and I'm sure we're going to have some really interesting conversations because my message to them is going to be that you cannot compromise with the establishment as we've seen your candidate do. You cannot do that and think that that's the pathway to win. It's not. And to some degree, people are going to have to experience that, and maybe they will have a fighting movement after the election, and maybe they will demobilize. I think we'll see. I'm going to urge them, obviously, to do the former. Right? So if you don't have any more questions for me, I'm going to have some questions for you. That's just the thing. Unless we need to break.
No, we're good.
Yeah? Do you... So I'm interested in sort of how you see the struggle today, and I want to, in your community, wherever you're working, and I'm going to read a brief quote from Karl Marx from 1850, before the Communist League, because I think it actually, it thinks about political intervention in an important way. He said, even when there's no prospect whatever of their being elected, the workers must put up their own candidates in order to preserve their independence, to count their forces, and to lay before the public their revolutionary attitude and party standpoint. Now, we didn't go around in the Kshama's office quoting Marx and Trotsky and so on all the time. But when I read this after we were out of the council office as I was writing the book, and I thought, this is really an important statement. And I do recall, too, in 2013, before Kshama was, when she was a candidate, she was a reluctant candidate, and SA voted, the members voted to make her candidate. She didn't want to be. And one comrade said to her, don't worry, it's not like you're going to get elected or anything. But the point is that what they were doing is practicing this, that even if they didn't think she was going to win, they put forward their candidates in order to announce, this is what we're standing for, this is what we're fighting for. Now you could look at that quote and also substitute the word issues for candidates, right? So you may not be able to win a $30 an hour minimum wage in Ontario tomorrow. But why not put that forward to say this is what we stand for, right? And this is what we're fighting for. How would that build the movement, right? So I want you to think about that and sort of reflect on how do you react to that quotation, and how do you think it relates to your experiences here?
Any last comments, any last questions, any last challenges you want to pose for us, Jonathan?
No, I just think it's been a real pleasure to be here with you all. And actually, I enjoyed delivering my remarks. I enjoyed even more having the discussion with you afterwards. And I think that's also the answer to the question of how do we grow more socialists. We do it through dialogue, through learning from one another, and also by having a good grounding in sort of our own politics, right? So thank you very much. And then I'd say finally, because the book is not a book for the sake of being a book, it's an organizing tool. So I want to hear your feedback after you read it. My website, where you can send me a message, is jonathanrosenblum.org. Please read the book, and then I want your critical feedback. And if you say, I loved everything in it, I'm going to be disappointed. Okay? No, seriously, I want to hear your critique, your thoughts, your perspectives, because that's how we're going to build the movement. So let's buy all those books out so you can drain my bank account and solidarity.
Thank you again, Jonathan. Thank you to everyone who's joined us tonight and participated in the conversation. You're welcome to stick around. We have some refreshments in the back. There are plenty of books to buy.